Okay, awesome. Well, welcome to September Gray Fine Art Gallery. I'm glad you're all here. Again, I'm so excited to see so many artists and women in the audience. This is wonderful. We're here celebrating Gabrielle Torres, Question Everything. So we're going to hear some great insights, hear her inspiration, her technique, all these wonderful things about her work. And we're just going to kind of make it a conversational artist talk. We'll ask similar questions that we normally do for an artist talk, but I want you to be engaged, ask questions, and just again make this very conversational, if you will. So I'm going to first start by introducing Gabe, as we call her here, our term of endearment, and read you her bio. Gabrielle Torres seeks to expose the balance between materiality and meaning. Her art aims to decompose, compartmentalize, blurring the lines of what we, humanity, presume to know. She uses materiality as the foundation and at times the focus in attempts to engender questions and thoughts from her audience. Torres was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and currently resides in Savannah, where she is now, I believe, a teacher at SCAD, which is awesome. And although she was raised in Philadelphia, her birthplace is Sumter, South Carolina. It's where she was raised, attending Lander University for Visual Arts. Torres teaches part-time, as we just mentioned. Well, actually now this is an older resume, but she's still, I don't think you're teaching anymore at Baton Rouge.
I do.
Correct? You do? Okay, so she's still teaching part-time at Baton Rouge Community College. Wonderful. As she's pursuing art as an artist. She's having her first exhibition with September Gray Fine Art Gallery here in Atlanta, and we're excited to have her. And I'll just read a little bit more about her. She's been recently featured in Savannah Morning News and Savannah Now magazine as Artist of the Month for the April edition. The following month, she was 9/12 feature artist. She has 2 solo shows on the horizon, one at Savannah State University, opening on August the 10th, and of course this show now, which opened back in November. I want to read her statement because it says a lot about the work, and then we'll dig into more of the background. There's a particular magnetic pull towards materiality. I tend to hold on to things that others might throw away, creating works from everything from my kids' outgrown clothes to non-decomposing plastic bags. When seeing the fabric, the psychedelic swirls juxtaposed with the Fury beige toilet seat cover I threw away last year, the medium sinks, complementing one another. Piles of wine bottles suffocate my studio, waiting to be smashed and transformed. Transparent champagne tulle left over from my handmade wedding dress is intertwined with plastic bags in waves of associated impulse. When constructing paintings, I overlay fabric swatches, painting in lucid brushstrokes, giving the material a chance to breathe. I'm an explorer of parts, junk, and yesterday's treasures. Ideas come to me methodically, like labor, and instinctually as combinations of material that part a path through the possibilities stuff cluttered of my domestic life. The subconscious mind is intriguing to me. My work relates to social constructs and superstructures that affect the mind. In a world bent on categorization and clean definitions, I teeter on the edge of everything yet commit to nothing, surfing my subconscious. I am an artist before everything, race, class, status, and gender. This world is a sea, and my instincts are a compass. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
Now, before I start, I want to share with you when I first saw the work. She actually came to the studio, we met, we had a conversation. She showed me the work online. I'm like, this is absolutely stunning. I love this work. I'm gonna come to Savannah and see your work. So came to Savannah, saw it in person, was intrigued, of course, by the texture, the subject matter, and just, I fell in love. I said, let's work together. I love this work. But when she did the opening, I'd had time to sit with the work for a few days and really look at it. And I said, let me tell you when I look at this work what I see. And I just want to read this to you because this is what I felt. I know we all see different things when we look at work. I said, I see your spirit, I see memories, I see Southern joys, I see family, I see distance, I see love. I see it all in a beautiful, imperfect way like we all are. If we all took stock of our life, we could uncover the tattered clothes of yesteryears, the memories of broken glass and trash forgotten. but Gabe finds a purpose and weaves this tapestry of displaced and forgotten objects. Question Everything is the title, but I don't question this extraordinary artist and how she compels me to see the beautiful in our or my imperfect life. So I'm going to start with why Question Everything? Why was that the title of the show?
So I believe hello everyone to start off with. I believe the title of this show came from a collaboration of the way that I grew up. So I moved from Philadelphia, as you mentioned. I am an only girl with 3 brothers, and I'm an artist. So naturally, like I'm an oddball, like some of us in here. You know, we don't quite fit into this category. We don't quite fit into this category, but we kind of make our own, or we're not worried about it in a sense, which is kind of what my work teeters on a little bit. But for the most part, I think I learned to question everything from the idea that I did not 100% fit into a specific space. And then it kind of evolved into, you know, being a person of color and being a woman, and then that aspect colliding with, like, oh, well, you know, you talk this way, you don't really talk this way, or you look like this, or you look like that. And I'm like, well, what do these things really mean? And I was also raised in a very Christian household where women were supposed to act like this and men were supposed to do this. And being raised with all boys, that's not really gonna fly. So I was already starting to question things at a younger age. So I believe that this idea of questioning everything was already manifesting before I even knew it. A lot of times the things that we create and we do have already been inside of us since at a younger age. So kind of fast forwarding to the future, now after being exposed to different things throughout graduate school at SCAD, and you know, they have a really extraordinary way of just kind of opening your eyes, flooding you with material and resources and things like that. I really started to go back and think about how I grew up and who I was, and I started to ask questions. And I think that idea of not feeling like I fit into a category, even as a wife, I started thinking like, well, why does my husband look like he's so stressed out about the bills? I'm stressed out too, but he's real stressed out over here. So, but I noticed that conversation was a common conversation, but why? You know, why aren't women supposed to do these things? Why, you know, are we supposed to be more maternal in a sense? So the idea started to kind of manifest in multiple areas, and I was noticing like a common denominator. Mm-hmm. And of course and I always want to state that the idea of colonialism, because that's what we're questioning in this body of work. We're questioning, like, well, you know, why is it that we're told that we need to do this? Like the superstructure that affects our minds before we're even born, the things that our mom and dads tell us to do, which are not a bad thing, but in the moment we look back on and was like, was that the right thing to do? So I think, like I said, the combination of when I became a mom and a wife and already being a pretty vibrant person in a sense, to say the least, it all came together for me to start turning these ideas. And of course, being a person of color, you know, why do when I go to work, do I feel uncomfortable that I'm the only black person in this room right now? Why do, you know, like the conversations that I have with people, white, black, yellow, female, or whatever you could be, why does it seem like they have like this effect of not knowing the things that they should know or questioning, you know? And I'm thinking of conversations in particular that I'm sure we'll go a little bit more into, but it's a really broad surface to scratch in a sense, but so it's hard to try to explain it all, but in a sense, I think that's where it mostly came from.
Question Everything, I get it. I was listening and you were talking about being a mother or a wife and a black artist, and I was watching this interview with Angela Mayo and Romare Bearden, who's an artist, if those that don't know who Romare Bearden is, and she was talking about, as a black woman or as an artist, she was asking Romare Bearden, how do you feel about being referred to as a black artist? And I found he preferred to be, of course, called an American artist, but her answer to him was so interesting. She said, well, you know, I don't mind being referred to as a black artist because it doesn't really contain me. I'm a mother, I'm a teacher, I'm a poet, I'm many things, but we're all part of our product of our environment and our surroundings. How do you feel? Because I know a lot of artists have this discussion all the time. I'm sure most of you can relate. You want to be known as a great artist, not just a black artist, but that is part of who you are. But I like how Maya said, it doesn't contain me. I am that, but I'm many more things. Right. But I don't mind. How do you feel about that when you're looking at your work? It's very biographical, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, because all of these images are people in her family, grandmothers, children, cousins. But if someone would refer to you as Gabrielle, the Black artist, how do you take that and how do you feel about that?
Forgive my silence, I'm trying to think about how to put this. I don't 100% appreciate being categorized. You don't, when they introduce a white artist, they don't say this is a white artist. I think that the categorization that has been created sometimes hinders us in a sense. With that being said, it's like a catch-22 to be nice to know that this is a Black artist that's speaking tonight, but at the same time, I feel like the ultimate freedom is not having to think about your skin color.
Right.
Like, white people don't walk around thinking that we have, like, this is gonna happen today, this could happen today, this could happen today, this could happen today. They don't. We walk around, and I walk in a room, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, none of my colleagues are Black, this is interesting. And I also went to a college where I was the only Black person hanging out with a bunch of white people, so I've never normally had a problem with this, but apparently at one point in time it became a problem, or it became something that I noticed. And so it's like this idea that I wanted this freedom, and I'm actually working on a body of work right now for the Telfair, crossing my fingers, that the ultimate freedom is not having to think about color. So if I'm putting a categorization on the fact that I am a person of color, I'm clearly thinking about color. Now, if we look at a lot of Black art that's been created, a lot of it is about race. Not all, but a lot. And to me, after a while, you look at a lot of Black art, and it's like, this is about race, this is about race. Different ideas, even my work, a different take on it. It's a different take, but in a sense, it's constricting. But why is it constricting? Because that's our daily repertoire in a sense. So it's like artists create what they're most passionate about. They create the best work when they're fueled by something, when they're inspired by it, when they're moved by it. I know, because I clearly still create about it. Right. But in a sense, where do we get that freedom to where we could just create, and not that we don't, plein air paintings, just for the simple fact, just to make it. And of course, like, as I feel like I need to state this, even though I've said it 3 times, we do. But the most, I feel like, gut-wrenching work that I see sometimes is about Black issues, and I love that it's about Black issues, but it's this paradox of why is it about Black issues? Why are these 3 main topics from Black artists about Black issues? Why isn't this one talking about ecology? Why isn't this one talking about, I don't know, gender roles? And they might have a hybridity about them, and they're talking about more than one thing, but for the most part, so to answer your question, I went around my elbow to get to it.
That's wonderful, yeah.
No, I think it's about time to stop with these categories that are placed on us by a colonized mindset. Like, we've been told to think, and then lots of people have been told, like, this is what you should think. This is what, and without literally being those exact words, we're conditioned in a sense. So I think that it's time to just say, this is an artist. You know, I am all of these things. I'm a mother, I'm an artist, I am Black, I am female, and I am proud of every last one of these things. But honestly, if you're gonna put me in any category, I'd prefer to be put in one as just being an artist. Right. And that's just me. And that's the category that I say that I wanna be in.
And like you said, that's the ultimate freedom. I was gonna say you should do a
Ultimate
show,
freedom.
But you're working on that already. That's
the words.
But will we ever have that freedom?
It's a tough one, because even in creating that work, what is the premise of it?
Because I don't care what your industry is, if you're a doctor or you're a lawyer or an artist or an esthetician, or you're in business, oh, we're supporting this Black doctor, this Black esthetician, this Black business. It's kind of what we do. We want to make sure we put that title there to say, oh, we're, you know, this is a Black doctor or a Black lawyer. So not artists, you know, aren't the only ones in the profession that have to deal with that. So.
Which is nice, because I feel comfortable, like, when I'm looking for a doctor. So I like to know. So it's like, where do these lines?
So will we ever have that freedom?
I don't have the answers to you. I'm just saying, I think it's time to come away from it, but I like to know sometimes.
And I understand artists want to get away from that, you know, saying, I'm just a great artist. Why do I have to be? It's interesting, I was doing an art show, and all of the artists in my show are abstract expressionists. So if you walk up to the show, you're just like, these are amazing works by amazing artists, but they didn't know the artists were Black because there were no signifiers in there, or no downtrodden, I hate to say, Negroes or suffering, or some little things that would make you think this is a Black artist. So it was interesting, someone said, September, you should go and put a picture of each artist by the work, because they're assuming these are white artists. They're not assuming these are Black African American artists. I said, that's really sad. But we tend to do that. We just decide this is their medium, this is what they do, but we're so much more than that, as Maya Angelou would say, and as you would say. But I don't know if we'll ever have that freedom in this lifetime to not acknowledge that. And it can be your superpower, and you can make it what you want it to be.
It can totally be that.
Yeah.
And I would also say one of the reasons why Question Everything has the umbrella of race, sex, maternal, paternal, social economic issues is because I did not want all the work to be predominantly about race, but I could not do it.
Not acknowledge it.
No, because I experience it. Look at my skin.
Right.
But I needed to, in my spirit, not to feel like I was giving it total power, even though there were some things that I needed to say. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I wanted to have my cake and eat it too, I guess.
Right. So clearly this work, you're inspired by your family. Tell us, if you will, we can even start with this piece, the inspiration behind this piece, which I love. This is absolutely beautiful. It's entitled Me and My Crew, Part 1.
So Me and My Crew is a compilation of all of the cousins. In my family, we come from a very diverse assortment of races, and I just love that. When I see families that are mixing it up, and it doesn't matter if you are, if you're not. But to me, the ultimate sticking it to colonialism is making mixed kids, because it's like you didn't get what you wanted here, because no matter what, we are people and we do these things. So it doesn't matter if you're mixed, not mixed, Puerto Rican, my kids are half Puerto Rican, black, this kid's Asian, they are all beautiful. It doesn't make, oh, this is mixed kid's cuter than the rest. No, it's just the idea of they are all cousins, they are all family, and it's simple in a sense because this wasn't planned, they just kind of came out this way. However, they're together, and I think that life should be this simple at sometimes. It shouldn't be always about these ideas, but and just to kind of explain a little bit about the work is created from my children's clothes. So all of these swatches in the back, the shirt, all of it's from, and these two right here these are my children, and these are all of their cousins. And I'm proud of the family. I'm proud of the idea of thinking that, we step outside of the box, and even if we don't, it's totally fine. But to me, it shows unity. You can't show any more unity than, in my opinion, when you mix with someone in a sense. That's literally a mixing. So that's one thing that I really enjoyed about this piece.
Okay, your medium, your technique, and how you use your medium. In case you didn't hear earlier when I was reading the statement, she uses discarded clothes, wine bottles, plastic trash bags. How did you get to using this medium? Was there an influence in your life? Are there artists you were emulating? What made you decide on this medium besides just painting these images?
Well, I think it started off by, I mentioned ecology because at one point in time I thought I wanted to make more work about issues with recycling and sustainability and things like that, and that's actually where I started off. And I don't know if it was, I think it was right after what happened with George Floyd that I honestly did a little bit more digging than what I normally do. And I'm not sure how at one point in time I didn't do enough digging, but I'm the type of person, if I'm gonna talk about something, that I'm gonna know what I'm talking about. So after that happened, it kind of trajected me to do more digging and more digging and more digging and more digging. And once you know, you can't unknow, so that happened. So there was a combination of things trying to combine these ideas of, I do 100% feel like if we don't figure out how we're gonna treat this planet a little bit better, then forget all these issues we're talking about. We're not even gonna have a planet to stand on. So that idea still sticks with me, but I also use paint, which is toxic. So it's you have to fully know what you're talking about when you're talking about it. So these ideas were kind of manifesting, but I was always hoarding. I was always hoarding toys. Our Christmases would get larger and larger and larger, and my studio would fill out with more things that we were trying to figure out what to do with and rehome. And I got to the idea of trying to use all these different fabrics and put them together, and that's why there's melted plastic in some of these, and I still do that. I don't really vocalize it as much because clearly the work is not 100% eco-friendly, but I do think that if we all do a little, it helps. So I continue to do it. After a while as an artist, you could say, well, this is just what I do. And I'm not at that point, but this is what I do and this is what I enjoy to do. So I do continue to make the work that way. The fabric, more so than the actual plastic bags that are melted into it, is generally chosen for a specific reason. Let me think about one of these in here. This one, the next one over, the fabric in this painting came from my aunts. So I have 4 aunts. It's all been used. They all donate their clothes. And to me, it makes the work a little bit more visceral to know the story behind it. And I had an uncle that passed away this year, and I tend to think, I can't just think about one thing. I have to think about, why did this person pass? He passed from unnatural causes at a young age, and he passed from a drug overdose. And then I start thinking about how do our people get to these points and things like this. So at this point in time, I'm very emotional about the piece. However, I cannot just think about that. I have to think how do we get to this point? And I think a lot of people are just thinking, why are we at this point? We have to think about how. So at this point in time when creating this one, that was the idea. And so the fabric being used in these pieces are from, his sisters. And it resonated very much to make these pieces about the fabric from the person, or the fabric that represents the person. If I don't always necessarily have fabric that is from them, I will use something that has their essence or their aura in a sense. This is, okay, this looks like something that my grandfather would wear. So that's just a little bit behind that.
I remember earlier when we did the opening, there was talks about the labels in the material. Was there something going on as well with the labels? With Polo and different Gucci.
So,
I remember there's a commentary about that.
Of how we see polos. It's like you dress up, you wear a polo. There's like a hoity-toityness about wearing polos. There's a pretentiousness about wearing polos sometimes. People have too many polos sometimes. They spend way too much money on polos. They have a closet full of polos. They live in the ritziest neighborhoods, and then you have people that wear polos with Jordans that probably should spend their money on other things. There's a contrast of this idea of how we feel about polo, and not everyone, but some people. And I think it's interesting because if it's like Iozide or whatever it's called, I'm not sure of all the brands, but it's not the same. It's got to be a polo, right? But this pretentiousness. So polo has groundings on social economic issues as well. It's talking about no matter what class we feel like we are from, it's like, okay, let me pull you back down in your pedestal. We all human here. We're all just trying to do the same things in life in a sense, different ways, different things. But the idea of how we see certain things and certain materials is really interesting, and how you could find these two people may not ever mix and mingle in their life, but this person has a closet full of polos and this person has a closet full of polos. It's really interesting to me, like polar opposites sometimes.
True. So we've touched on cultural issues, and we've talked on ways to materiality of your subject matters. When you're starting a body of work like this body of work, how do you decide on the subject matter? Does this come to you organically, or did you already decide, I'm going to make this more biographical about my family? Or does it start organically and just start evolving as you're building the work? How do you decide that I'm going to do this body of work on my family in question? Where does it start? How does your process start for you as an artist?
I think it starts in everyday life. And I know that sounds vague, but I'll elaborate on it. It's like they say that as an artist, sometimes you want to be in the studio, but you want to get out and experience life a little bit, because it's the experience of life that fuel your work. So as I have these conversations, like the work that I'm working on for the proposal about like not letting race dictate every mindset that we have, and saying that we're not going to make our work about this in a sense. It came from conversations that I had recently. I had a conversation, and these two individuals will remain unnamed. We'll just call them the individuals for right now. But I had a conversation, and someone was talking about how they liked Future so much. So that gives you a age for this person if they like Future so much. And they were saying that he talks about women that are up like a certain look. They're very pretty women that are, like they basically, how did he put it? Their standards are too high. And the person started talking to me about saying, like, that, well, black people act like this and black people act like this. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh gosh, this is a load right here. Woo, okay, like, hey, dial it back in your head. B, how do we explain this? Because I'm overloaded. You know, I'm overloaded, but so this conversation evolved into me thinking about your mind is colonized. We're people. There's no color on the way that somebody talks, dress, or acts. That's ridiculous. And I will stand by that and not say, well, maybe you feel like, no, we're just people. You can't say that person acts black or that person acts white. I was offended. And this person was a family member, and I'm like sitting there like, all right. So and there was another conversation I had on Thanksgiving with an individual about, you know, I said to them, you know, Thanksgiving can be insulting to some. You know, we celebrate it because we're used to these traditions, and that's some of the reasons why certain things are still going on in life that shouldn't be. People are used to these traditions of statues. Get rid of them. You know what I mean? And not the same for everyone. We don't mind Thanksgiving sometime, but the idea of that we keep these things going, and you think Indian people enjoy Thanksgiving? Probably not. So, and I'm talking to this individual about, you know, why I didn't understand why I had to talk to the person about why. Even if they didn't agree with it, I felt like they still should at least know what the argument could have been about. But they're older generation, like 70, 80. So to me, they've been reading these textbooks. At one point in time, the government's been telling them this. And so that's what I'm saying, like the colonization is only about color, because this person is not black. We're not talking about black issues. We're talking about indigenous issues here. And it's a colonized mindsetting. So when I have these conversations, they really stick with me. And, you know, I'll go in my studio and I'll write down, have my journal, write down. And then normally it's just a lot of stuff that's flooded, but I'm like, what is the relation to these ideas right now? How are these coming together? What am I feeling? So it is in the everyday life, the conversations that I have with people about the passions that I had, the idea of trying to make a difference. Like these conversations I have with people, and I finish them with them. Some people might say, I'm not even having this conversation with you, but I'm like, I'm going to indulge in this because, I don't even say indulge, I'm going to have this conversation because maybe something I will say will get through. 99% of the time, no, but maybe. You know, I try to be hopeful, but I don't know.
Interesting. Okay, 2 more questions, then I'm going to open it up for Q&A. Who are some of the biggest influences for you, artistic influences in your work or in doing your work as an artist?
2 people come to mind. I think we talked about Suzanne Jackson for a little while earlier. I interned with her. Very brief moment. The pandemic came through and I was like, man. So we were together for a few months and I got the opportunity to see her work develop from, you know, work older than I am, you know, 50, 60-year-old work, and I'm documenting it and archiving it for her. Don't even want to touch it. She's just like, just take a picture of it already and make sure it looks good. And she never really said that, but in a sense, you know, I was saying earlier, artists are a lot less like fragile about their work than the people that are touching it and moving it. So she's not worried about it, but I was. But I remember when I first discovered her work and some people came into my studio at SCAD and they were like, at the time I was just developing these textures. There was no actual figures on them. I'm just making these textures. And they were like, this kind of reminds of Suzanne Jackson's work. And I was like, oh, I just saw her work at the Telfair with my kids. I was like, it's beautiful. I was like, she did this clear technique. And I'm like, how did you do that? And they were like, well, you should just ask her. I was like, you can do that? Like, she seems way too prominent for me to just, it's like emailing Samuel L. Jackson. I'm just gonna ask her. And so I just did. I sent her a message and she said, hey, you know, she never answered the question, but she did say, she was like, hey, do you want to intern? And I was just like, at the time I was like, yeah, of course. So I went in and I interned from her, and it was the most invigorating feeling to just see that and be a part of it, and to just say that I got to spend that time with her. And then my next artist is Elena Tusi. And I have some other work that's more texture with fabric and more 3-dimensional. I build looms and everything like that. And they take on different forms. So they can cut them off and you can restructure them on walls in different ways. And I very much not only appreciated what the concept behind his work is, but also how none of his work takes on the same form when it's been installed. It's always, and then there's also an artist, even though curators can be artists, there's like this liberty that the curator has to reinstall this work that's exciting as well. And I really appreciate that. So those are two
Two great artists, yes. And my last question, as a woman artist, do you feel that opportunities are limited or not as a woman artist?
Yes and no. Yes.
Seeing that there's several women artists in the audience.
The people that sit on the artist boards are still some of the same people that have sat there. So in a sense, when you get up, it can be doors closing because the people that sit up high on these museum podiums or whatever you would call it, they still don't look like us sometimes. However, we are trending. So what have you not seen in museums right now? What have you not seen, or not now, but what have you not seen? What has been missing?
Women artists.
Women artists of
color.
So it's just like, we have way too many of these, let's get some of these in. So I think that it's a good time to be a woman of color as an artist, but at the same time, it's almost like a facade. It's we'll make you feel like this, but there's still some limitations on, there's still limitations on being a female artist. And I think we were talking about earlier how Suzanne has been working and there were other artists in the area that did not look like her, came up, pop.
But I think you hit it initially. Who's sitting on the board? Who are the trustees?
The
Who's
ones
running
that
the
look like
institutions?
the ones that didn't look like her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because I happened to be a part of a committee in Chicago recognizing Elizabeth Catlett. Well, she was in her 90s, 95 when they finally recognized her and paid tribute to her, but in her 90s. This is a phenomenal world-renowned artist. But these are the people that sit on the boards that decide who we're going to honor, who we're going to show, who we're going to carry, who we're going to collect, and that has limitations when you don't have people that look like us sitting on those boards. Even though we don't want to say forging the freedom of not being black artists, but we have to use that sometimes to diversify these boards.
That catch-22.
Yeah, exactly. So now I'm going to open it up to the floor for all these amazing artists and collectors and people in the audience to ask questions about your work or about you, Gabe, our artist.
I'm interested in your choice of figurative on top of the fabric. Which one comes first? Do you make the surface and then you already have an idea what you're going to paint on it, or do you just let it fly?
The planning comes first. So the sketches, the contour sketches of the figures that I'm going to paint comes first, but these pieces are sewn together on a sewing machine first, and then they're stretched around the substrates. So, and I try to plan out what fabric might overlap nicely when this part is painted on it, when the figures go on it. And it's more like an eyeball.
Okay. But do you already have the images set that you're going to paint?
I do.
You select those and then go back and then create the substrate and then choose which one's going to go on which?
So I choose the photo that I'm going to work from, so the images, the figures, and then I'll choose the fabric. The fabric has to match the individuals because it has to speak about the piece, and then I'll decide how it could be constructed the best to where if there is a rift in the fabric or where you can see the seam line, is this a good spot for the seam line to show, or should this be more of a innard sew? I'm not sure if that's the technical term then, or when the seam line is facing outward. So I do think about those things as well. Yeah.
So I have a question. So are you saying that your canvas is made up of the fabric first and you stretch it and then paint on
Yes.
You can actually see through some of the fabric. Like this piece over here, that bottom left-hand bluish color area, that's the wall. Like that lighter blue, you might not be able to see it. It's like the left-hand bottom corner. That's the wall. It's like a transparent area. And there's some other ones that have some transparency to them as well. So at first, I did leave before I started building them, I would buy them and then I'd stretch them on top. but after I started building my own substrates, then I, of course, didn't put a canvas on top of it first, and then I enjoyed the idea of the transparency and kind of revolting against the pale of history of like, you shouldn't be able to see the substrates and things like that. I actually wanted that idea because that's part of my work in a sense as well.
Since I'm not a painter, what do you mean by substrates? Is that the actual canvas?
Like the support, basically.
Oh, okay.
Those are the substrates.
Okay.
So I'll sew it together on the sewing machine, swatch by swatch, or I call them swatches, even though they might be bigger than a traditional, like small swatch for a wedding dress. But they're cut out in squares, and I'll take them, I'll lay them out on the floor, I'll piece them together, I'll kind of shift them around, look at the picture, and I'll say, okay, this one could be better here, this one could be better here. And I used to take some pins and pin them, but then I started pricking my finger too much, and I'm like, I'm not that tedious, just lay them out and then we'll sew them together. So I lay them out and then I would sew them together after that, and it worked out just as well. And then I'll take it and I'll stretch it around the substrate. So I don't use the canvas. I do use some areas of canvas because canvas, of course, the paint adheres to the canvas much better, even with the gesso, of course. So some materials, it's like you kind of have a guessing game when you're working with so many materials. Sometimes it's like, I don't like this paint. You can't put this on me.
Do you cover with gesso then?
Some of it I leave it free, and some of it I'll do my little planning process, and I come back with gesso. So the gesso helps to where the paint will stick to sometimes almost the most difficult fabric, sometimes, but also you don't want to work over what you're creating. So I have to leave some of it free and not all worked over. So
Is gesso like clear or what?
It can be.
It can be. I'm using regular white gesso, but it can be clear.
And that is to create a canvas-like feel for the paint?
Yes, but also it's more so.
Treat the fabric?
Yeah, so think of it like a primer. You prime it,
Okay.
so the paint sits on top and doesn't just soak into.
Okay.
Yes.
You mentioned that you prepare sketches, and I'm curious, when you're putting your artwork together, does feeling and emotion when you're painting make you change it sometimes? Like, do you have a vision for one thing, but while you're in the middle, feeling and emotion make you adjust it?
I don't think so.
So you have a target of how you like it to.
If anything that changes the mood or the feeling, it's music. So music. So a lot of the times when I'm drawing it's not about the precision. It's more so, honestly, about executing it. So I guess it is about the precision in a sense, but it doesn't need to be perfect is what I'm saying. But it is about executing. So not perfect, but executing the piece. But I want the abstract lines. I do a lot of contour sketches and things like that. But if I'm listening to different music, and let's say if I listen to like Miles Davis, which is really common in the studio, like if there's music going and there's different beats and tones, that does change very drastically how I'm drawing something, and sometimes how I'm painting it.
Now I'm surprised you said Miles Davis. Explain that. It's very moody, but I would not think with this type of work you would listen to Miles Davis.
Always.
Always?
Well, that's a lot though.
Okay.
It's like, it's a go-to, and then it's calming, and it helps me focus.
So what age of Miles Davis like?
I don't know. I say, I'll tell you why. I'm okay with explaining this. I say Pandora or New Era stuff.
Yeah.
Put on shuffle Miles Davis. I can't tell you what a song is called. I know Blue and Yellow, and that's because I did a dance to it like 15 years ago. Other than that, I don't know what song it is. I don't know. It's just, it'll play for hours and hours and hours and hours. I could tell you that a song is Miles Davis, but I can't tell you the time or the title. Yeah.
So why are you surprised that she's Miles Davis?
Just her age and looking at her and looking at the body of work. I mean, Miles Davis is a true, to me, a pure jazz artist.
I love jazz.
And not everybody likes Miles, and it's very mellow and it's very different. And again, most young people don't either know about Miles Davis or have never heard of him, not unless he did some things contemporary with a contemporary artist. You don't hear younger people saying, I listen to Miles Davis.
I'll tell you this, I think I can tell you why Miles Davis now. I listen to Miles Davis amongst other jazz musicians, and I also listen to classical music.
Okay.
But when I was younger, my mom I had a hard time like focusing And I don't know, she also, she's a child find facilitator, so she helps put kids with special needs in school. So she's pretty aware of things. She noticed that I was just like all over the place, which is probably why the work is very textured and all over the place. But she would put on classical music and jazz for me when I was little, so I could like concentrate. And now there's no such thing as no music playing in the studio.
I love it.
Even when we walked in here and I was talking to my stepdaughter, I was like, I need some music in here if I'm talking tonight. So it's a comfort level. When I teach, I have music on. It's not Miles Davis what I'm teaching, because we're supposed to try to form a bond with the students a little bit, but I have my 21-year-old stepdaughter to help me with more of like hip music and stuff like that. So
I love it.
Yeah.
So I should have kept the music on while you were talking. Yes, he was. Yes, she's a photographer, and I believe you knew Miles, correct?
Really?
Right, yeah.
What is your relationship with quilts? There seems to be a quilting aspect to some of the work.
It's true.
I think that I have a relationship with fibers in general. Like, as I mentioned, like I have more work that's a little bit more diverse than this, in my opinion, as far as this is diverse, but it might cross more of concentrations. So I have work that are looms. They're built. So I make the substrates again, and then I'll use wire, and then I'll wrap the wire, and I use the same fabric that I have piling up in my studio, and I weave it through the weft, and I create these giant, I call them loom paintings, through the fabric being woven, and I actually add live plants into them. So for this work, it's just, I took a lot of fibers classes because, like I said, there's always something already inside of you from the beginning. My mom is a seamstress. Like, she made my wedding dress when I got married, and I have like several sewing machines in my house. Even though I'm nowhere near as good as her, I have some little ones for my kids. I use a sewing machine. So I think the idea of fibers has always been there. I work with hair sometimes, which is a fiber. So the quilts, I mean, I've done research like G's Bend quilts and things like that. It's not that it wasn't like a main influence, but there wasn't an idea like, let me go look at quilts. I look at more of like looms and weavings than I do quilts, actually.
And the looms and weaving is beautiful.
Oh my gosh.
And I've seen the work, and we thought about having it, but she puts live plants and intertwines them with the weaving. I was like, okay, if the plants die, then what do I do? And she's like, just replace them in September. I'm like, okay, I don't know about that. That's too much work. That's too much work.
She's right. So the loom paintings, people like in Savannah, I'm showing this loom painting here. It's like the monster, but like you're saying with the loom paintings, people just want to look at them though.
Right.
They're afraid of them because they have live plants growing in them.
Right.
Can you describe a loom painting?
So let's say we have a painting about this big, and some of them are this big. There's no actual canvas or fabric on the front. A traditional loom, and they can be made on lots of different things. You'll take, like rugs are made from looms, clothes are made from looms. So you'll take generally more traditionally some type of yarn, and you'll wrap from the top to the bottom or left to right, just depending on how you are weaving the fabric in and out of the yarn. So a lot of people take them off, and you have like a carpet or something, or not carpet, but a rug or something like that, or a shirt or a scarf or whatever it might be. I leave them on. The whole presentation is the work, and then I'll take live plants and I'll build baskets or some type of this. Sometimes they hang from the ceiling, or sometimes they're protruding through the actual loom, and there's live plants that are woven into them. So does that kind of help give a visual? Okay, you're welcome.
Any other questions?
Yes.
All right.
Hi.
At the opening, I shared with you that I was drawn to the way that you interweave the figurative work with the fabric. I wasn't prepared then to ask, but I think I understand the attraction for me now. And so I'm curious, as you add the fabric and create the obstructions and, I won't say distortions, but to the faces, to the figurative work, is there any kind of special objective there to create the moods? in terms of the essence of the spirit of the people that you are creating?
I would say definitely. The face of a figure is kind of a window into sometimes what the work is about. So the faces need to, well, what they're doing, they need to have some type of the feeling of how they're portrayed. It can't just be haphazard. It has to be purposeful. It has to insinuate something. Like for this one over here in the corner, this is like a hybrid of my daughter and I. So it's talking about 3 different phases of how I went through, I wouldn't say sheltered, but a lot of the things that I've discovered through reading and research now, I didn't know. I didn't know about war on drugs growing up. I didn't know about redlining. There's a lot of things that I just did not know about, and I talked to my mom about it one day. I was like, why didn't I know these things? And she said, because I didn't want you feeling like this was who you are. You know, you are this person, but you're much more in a sense. But these go through the phases of finding these things out, becoming of knowing, and then the rebel is in the middle, and then the calm of myself is in the end. But there, like I said, I use my daughter for a reference here for my younger self, even though she looks more like my daughter than me. But the face is like the intense stare of the face, and then the way that the middle figure has their hand raised in like a rebellious way. And the last face is kind of disappearing in the background. It has no face. It's not knowing. And it's all the way on the right-hand corner over there. So the faces have to say something. Like these two show the innocence. The innocence, you're not worried about showing your face. You're not worried about what's going on. You're just having a good time. So the body language and how the faces are looking, they have to insinuate something about what the work is about, or it's kind of, I wouldn't say meaningless, but it doesn't have the same effect.
Could you talk about the one, this is, I believe, your grandmother?
I'll be even this side out right now.
Right, and yeah.
And so, man, both of these, so my grandmother, I'll be relatively quick with these because they both are kind of packed full. These two kind of play on each other. This was taken before my uncle died. And the look on her face looked like she was foreshadowing that she knew something was going to happen. And my uncle and my grandmother are very close because he was the only boy, and I have a boy, so I understand how close you can be to that only boy. So she just looked like she knew. So the face needed to show something somber. It couldn't show, she couldn't be smiling in it. If she couldn't be, it had to be something that really, resonated. And then this one over here talks about how colonialism can affect marriage and expectations on your significant other in relationships. And there's a little bit of space between us. There's a doorway right behind us. But the looks on the face, they're not overly excited. They're just kind of very in the moment. They're very plain. So the expression is very important. Yes.
I noticed on the one right behind you, on several of the kids' faces, half of the faces is blurred, or there's paint on it, or over their eye, or like the young man on his end right here, he's got red kind of out of his nose, but then that one eye is kind of faded out. Does that have a specific meaning, or that's just?
I've noticed a theme in my work of placing fabric or something over some of the eye or the face. And once I noticed it, I started doing it intentionally to say, like, I see something. At this one, I'll be honest, it wasn't intentional always. But then when we got to this one and this one, it started becoming, I noticed a pattern, and I decided I wanted to continue this pattern because I liked what it could insinuate about the work.
Okay. I have to ask you, was this crown intentional? Did you plan on putting the crown there? Did it happen organically? How did he end up with a crown?
It was his birthday.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Love it.
And I'll be honest about this one. We get really heavy with the idea of colonialism. It's a really heavy topic. This is a feel-good. I felt like it.
Yeah.
I felt like,
I thought it was about your birthday.
I felt like, the work can be a little heavy on the topic, and this one just, when I saw it, I was like, man, look at these guys.
It makes you happy when you look
Didn't
at it.
you say that too?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
It's a feel-good, yeah.
Just makes you feel good.
And the ideas came of like why it made me feel so good, but the first instinct, it wasn't from a conversation. It was just, this feels great. Made me happy.
Well, Gabe, your work makes me happy. This is a phenomenal show. Question everything. Why don't you tell us what's next? What can we expect from you next? What are you working on now?
So I've been planning that out all day as well. What's next? So I've got some work going up at the Cultural Arts Center in Savannah. There is some work going up at Sulphur.
And say that slowly. Work is going up in Savannah.
The Cultural Arts Center. I am. And let me thank you. Let me elaborate on that a little bit. Please. Because it is for Black History Month. And I'm also kind of funny about Black History Month because I don't want people reaching out to me because I'm Black and you want to put me in your gallery on Black History Month. So sometimes I say, it depends, I have to research the gallery and see if they're normally showing people, and sometimes I steer away from it because if my resume shows just Black History Month, it could be a problem, even though I'm very excited and glad that people want to do these things. It's always like a catch-22. But when I was approached about doing the show, the lineup was just a bunch of women it's all Black women, and I thought that was interesting to do all Black women for this show. I couldn't say no, and some of the artists that I am being featured with in that area are very prominent artists as well, and more regionally, some of them a little bit nationally. So it was exciting I'm always the one excited messaging them oh, what you guys think about doing this? So yeah, that one's coming up, and then there's one at Sulphur. I did a residency there, so they wanted all the past residents coming, and the piece being shown is this giant, probably 8 by 8 foot installation of fibers. All the people from the community in Savannah came and had a tough conversation with me about colonialism. That was the whole residency. Come sit with me, talk to me about your ideas on it, or just talk to me about your favorite place in Savannah. It's okay, whatever it is.
Now, Sulphur is in Savannah.
It is in Savannah.
And for the audience, is it a museum, cultural institution? What is
Sulphur? Sulphur is kind of it's a gallery, but it's like a co-op, more locally sourced space. And so that's the premise of it. So that piece, all the fabric in that piece came from donations from the community. So when they came in, they spoke to me. They brought me some of their personal belongings to weave into it. So it is, in fact, Savannah. So that piece is being brought back, and it was cut off the loom and it's being installed. So that's interesting. And then I have a solo show coming up at my undergrad. So that's coming up as well. And I'm filling out this proposal for the Telfair for their boxed out. So that would be a lovely honor to be able to have, but I don't have it yet, so you cross our fingers. So that's pretty much what's coming up, just producing a bunch of work, teaching, raising a family at the same time, staying busy.
Well, thank you, Gabe. I hope we'll all support Gabe in her exhibitions in Savannah, here in Atlanta, as you move forward. Thank you for being a part of this show here in Atlanta, and for being here to do this artist talk. We're happy about this show, and it's been a beautiful exhibition, well received. Wonderful opening, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, September.
So much.
Thank you.
It's an honor to be surrounded by this work. It's engaging, it's beautiful, and we're here to support you. So thank you again.
I appreciate it.
Here.
Thank you all.
Thank you.